Guys, welcome back to lecture 31. Today we are diving into one of the most critical and overlooked aspect of production machine learning, that is security and compliance. This is task 4.4 of domain 4, and honestly, this is where careers are made or broken. Okay, I've seen brilliant machine learning engineers build incredible models only to have them shut down by security teams because they ignored basic compliance requirements. Don't let that be you. Okay, security isn't just a checkbox, it's your professional reputation online. Why it matters. Let me paint you a picture that will keep you awake at night. A healthcare care startup of a friend with built an amazing diagnostic machine learning models. Right, they developed it without proper encryption. 6 months later, a security audit revealed that patient medical records were sitting in S3 buckets, completely unencrypted. The penalty, 2.3 million in HIPAA fines. The startup folded within 3 months. Okay, that's the reality of machine learning security failures. Here's what makes machine learning different from traditional software. Okay, we're dealing with massive data sets containing the most sensitive information imaginable. Medical records, financial transactions, personal identifiers, behavioral patterns. A single breach doesn't just cost money, it destroys trust, triggers regulatory investigations, and can literally put companies out of business. In healthcare, finance, and government, compliance isn't optional, okay? It's survival. HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, DSS, or FedRAMP. These aren't just acronyms, they are legal requirements with criminal penalties, okay? The beautiful irony, securing machine learning workloads on AWS is actually straightforward if you know the patterns, right? The tools exist, the frameworks work, you just need to use them correctly. All right, so now let's talk about the core security principles, okay? These 5 principles form the foundation of every secure machine learning deployment, right? Number one, encryption everywhere. If data exists, it should be encrypted, no exceptions. Least privilege IAM, give the minimum permission necessary, nothing more. Your training job doesn't need access to every S3 bucket in your account, right? And network isolation, keep your machine learning traffic off the public internet. Use VPCs and private endpoints religiously. And comprehensive logging. Every API call, every access attempt, every model inference should be logged and monitored. Okay. And compliance frameworks, know which regulations apply to your industry and configure accordingly. Master these 5 and you'll sleep better at night knowing your machine learning systems are bulletproof. All right, now let's talk about encryption, okay? Encryption is your first and most critical line of defense. At rest, encryption protects the stored data. Every AWS service that holds your machine learning data, S3, RDS, Redshift, SageMaker, integrates seamlessly with AWS Key Management Service, okay? Here's what this looks like in practice. Your training data in S3, encrypted with KMS. Your model artifacts, encrypted. Your features stored in RDS, encrypted. Your data warehouse in Redshift, encrypted. In transit, encryption protects data from moving between services, right? Every endpoint should use HTTPS and TLS 1.2 or higher. This prevents interception of inference requests, right? I once heard a story of a financial services company that had perfect at-rest encryption, but was sending credit scores over unencrypted HTTP, right? One packet capture could have exposed thousands of customer records. The AWS exam will test whether you know encryption is mandatory, not optional, right? The correct answer is always encrypt everything. Okay, so identity and access management. IAM is where most security breaches begin. Over-permissioned roles are number one attack vector. Here's the golden rule. Give the absolute minimum permissions required for the job to function. Your SageMaker training job needs access to one S3 bucket with training data, right? Don't give it S3 permissions on all bucket, right? Create a specific policy for that one bucket. Your inference endpoint needs to read from DynamoDB for feature lookups, right? Okay, grant DynamoDB get item on the specific table, not DynamoDB star, right? All tables. I mean, I've seen companies where machine learning role had power user access to make development easier. I mean, that's like giving every employee the master key to the building. It's convenient until someone steals it, right? And cross-account scenarios are common in enterprise environment. Okay, use IAM roles with trust policies. Never share access keys. Big Sam loves testing this pattern. Okay, pro tip: use IAM policy simulator to test your permissions before deployment. It will catch overprivileged roles before they become security holes. So network isolation. Okay, network isolation is your castle wall. Okay, it keeps the bad guys out and your data in. I deploy everything inside VPCs, right? SageMaker training jobs, inference endpoints, batch transform jobs. Keep them in private subnets with no direct internet access. And we use VPC endpoints religiously, and I mean it. When your machine learning workloads need to access S3, DynamoDB, or other AWS services, don't route through the public internet. Create VPC endpoints to keep traffic on the AWS backbone. Here's a real world example. Okay, a pharmaceutical company was running drug discovery models. Their initial setup had endpoints exposed to the internet. Okay, they moved everything inside VPCs with private endpoints. Attack surface went from like entire internet to only authenticated users inside the corporate network. Okay, the security team went from nervous wrecks to their big advocates. For regulated industries, this isn't optional. Healthcare companies can't have patient data traversing public networks. Financial firms can't expose transaction data on internet-based attacks, right? The exam will present scenarios like the bank needs private inference requests. The answer is always VPCs and VPC endpoints. All right, monitoring and auditing. You can't secure what you can't see, right? So monitoring and auditing provide the visibility you need. CloudTrail logs every API call made to AWS service. Who access your training data? When was your model endpoint called? Which IAM role made that suspicious suspect, right? CloudTrail has the answers. I once helped debug a data breach where someone was accessing customer data from a compromised training job. CloudTrail logs showed exactly which files were accessed, when, and by whom. Without those logs, we would have never been able to contain the breach. And CloudWatch monitors real-time metrics and can trigger automatic responses, right? Unusual spike in endpoint traffic, alarm fires, right? Error rate jumps, right? Notification sent. Someone trying to access data they shouldn't. Security team gets paged, right? Set up intelligent alerting. Don't just log everything, right? Act on suspicious patterns. Failed authentication attempts, unusual access times, geographic anomalies, these signals matter. So here's the best practice. Stream CloudTrail logs to CloudWatch logs. Then use CloudWatch insights to query for security events. You can detect threats in real time instead of discovering them weeks later. All right, so moving on to compliance framework, right? Compliance frameworks aren't abstract concepts. They're legal requirements with real penalties. HIPAA governs healthcare data in the US. Violation fines that start at $100 per record can reach up to $1.5 million per incident. GDPR applies to any EU citizen's personal data, regardless of where your company is located, right? Minimum fine, 4% of global annual revenue or 20 million euros, whichever is higher. PCI DSS protects payment card information. Non-compliance means you can't process credit cards, which kills most e-commerce businesses. FedRAMP is required for every US government workload. No certification means no federal contracts, right? So here is the critical insight. AWS provides infrastructure compliance, but you must configure your workloads correctly to maintain compliance. Now, AWS has achieved HIPAA, SOC, PAC, and FedRAMP certifications for SageMaker, S3, and other services. That means the underlying infrastructure meets compliance standards. But if you misconfigure IAM policies or skip encryption, you're still non-compliant. Okay, and there's a shared responsibility model, right? It applies everywhere. AWS secures the cloud. You secures what's in the cloud. Let's talk about some exam scenarios, right? This is exam test security through real-world scenarios. Here's how to think through them, right? So, scenario 1, hospital deploying patient diagnostic model where security measures are required. Think HIPAA compliance. You need KMS encryption for data at rest, TLS for data in transit, and least privilege IAM rules. VPC deployment with no public internet access and comprehensive cloud trail logging. Any missing piece fails compliance, all right? All right, scenario 2, bank needs to ensure inference requests never traverses public internet, okay? So classic network isolation question, right? Answer, deploy SageMaker endpoints in private VPC subnets and use VPC endpoints for AWS services across service access. So scenario 3, regulator demands complete audit trail of machine learning systems access, right? They want CloudTrail. It logs every API call with timestamps, source IPs, and user identities, right? Essential for compliance audits. All right, let's look at scenario 4. E-commerce site handling EU customers must meet GDPR requirements, right? So GDPR requires encryption, data retention limits, and right to deletion. So configure KMS encryption, set S3 lifecycle policies for automatic deletion, and build process to handle deletion requests. Right. Pattern recognition is key. Map the business requirement to AWS security services. All right, so let's recap it, right? Let's crystallize the security essentials for machine learning, for production machine learning. So encrypt everything, at rest with KMS, in transit with TLS. No exception, no shortcuts. Lock down access to IAM. Least privilege always. No training job needs your training job needs just one S3 bucket, not access to the entire account. Isolate networks with VPCs, right? Keep machine learning traffic private and use VPC endpoints for AWS service access. And monitor with CloudTrail and CloudWatch. Log every action, alert on anomalies, and respond to threats automatically. Okay. And know your compliance obligations. HIPAA for healthcare, GDPR for EU data, PCI for payments, FedRAMP for configure, and configure accordingly, right? The companies succeeding with production machine learning aren't just building better models. They're building them securely from day one. So security isn't a feature that you add later, okay? It's the foundation everything else builds on. So when you get security right, everything else becomes possible. Get it wrong and nothing else matters. Okay, so that wraps up lecture 31. Coming up next, we are diving into lecture 32, real world stories from production machine learning deployments, right? The lesson learned the hard way that could have saved your career. So see you there. And remember, the best machine learning model is the one that runs securely in production.